Corrigan's body, such that it walks out of the hospital, but is basically a zombie, with the bullet wound still between the eyes, um, muttering, rambling, scaring people on the streets. Meanwhile, though, the Spectre heads to the sort of purgatory, this in between, uh, between life and the afterlife. And it turns out that one of the Phantom Stranger's jobs at this time is to help ferry souls to the afterlife. And so the stranger's talking with Corrigan, and Corrigan is happy. And he says to the stranger, well, I'm dead and that stinks. It was nice coming back from the dead, but I'm free now. I don't have the guilt of carrying the Spectre around with me. And, with me dead, the Spectre will be dead too. He won't continue his murderous rampage. It's going to be done. It's so great. But then the Spectre appears and tries to bring Jim back to our plane of existence. And Jim discovers that he can actually go toe to toe with the Spectre. And in fact, he knocks the Spectre down. That leads to a brawl between the Spectre and Corrigan in front of a Phantom Stranger. And eventually Corrigan tires and he says, okay, Spectre, you won. I give up. I guess you always win. Do with me what you will. But at that point, the Spectre disappears. And Corrigan looks to the stranger, and Phantom Stranger says, he's gone. I think you can actually go back to your life, Jim. Jim says, okay. And he finds himself back in his body, and his body has healed itself of the bullet wound. And so, in a rather euphoric state, Jim heads back to his office. And he asks, or well, first he sees Kim and Coral, who are, delighted to see him. And, he's asking him questions about, what's gone on the last little bit. And they ask him, well, what about the Spectre? And Corrigan says, I think the Spectre sacrificed himself to let me live. I think he had this moment where he realized that I should be set free. And so here I am. But then as the conversation continues, Corrigan starts feeling very warm. And he gets this pain in his stomach. And he says, Kim, what day is it? And she tells him. And he says, oh, God. Oh, my God. It hasn't been 48 hours. Spectre, he didn't sacrifice himself. He didn't. And in front of Kim and Coral, Jim Corrigan transforms into the Spectre. And now it's the Spectre who's in the driver's seat. And the Spectre says, this sacrifice, this severe change was necessary in order to ensure my continued survival. I had to sacrifice my separate physical form such that I could continue to live on. But now I must share this body with Jim Corrigan. So now we can only take turns appearing. So now we go from an updated version of the Silver Age Corrigan-Spectre relationship to an early Golden Age / Bronze Age interpretation of the Corrigan-Spectre relationship. But now there's a twist. It's not Corrigan's mind, both when he's Corrigan and the Spectre. Okay, now you've got a transformation of the minds too. So the Spectre still has a completely separate mind and personality. The two can share memories with each other, but this is largely inconvenient for them both because now they've got to, now they have a new conflict for control of the body. And in the beginning, it seems that it's the Spectre who has greater control over triggering the transformation. But in later issues, we'll see that Corrigan has a measure of control too. He can at least try to reason with the Spectre before he tries to take over the body. And of course, this leads to a whole different relationship between Corrigan, Kim, and Xanadu. Jim and Kim continue to have their romantic relationship, but now they're both worried about approaching Madame Xanadu because they know that she is the Spectre's lover, and she's not going to be happy with this. That she can't see the Spectre whenever she wants. And indeed, there are times where Xanadu does get very angry with the Spectre, and he has to say to Xanadu, "Remember, my love, you were the one who said that I had to make this severe change. I did this so that we could still be together at least some of the time." And Xanadu relents and says, "Yes, I understand." But this all goes towards Madame Xanadu becoming a lesser character during this run. Near the end, we don't really see Madame Xanadu at all. In fact, as part of this new direction, we're introduced to several new characters. And it starts with a character named Zoran, who walks into Jim's office after Jim takes down a vampiric character. It's not Jim alone who takes down the supernatural character. The Spectre is involved, but it's Jim who gets caught on film, and so he becomes the hero detective, and he gets interviewed by this attractive young magazine reporter named Gina, and it's one of the few times we see Corrigan in a suit and tie, but it's a more relaxed suit and tie. I don't think he does up the top button on his shirt. And so now Corrigan starts to develop this reputation as someone who works in supernatural crimes. So we're introduced to Zoran, who comes into Corrigan's office and says, "I want you to work with me." And some readers might think at this point that Zoran really wants Corrigan to work for him. And Corrigan isn't one to be pushed around. Corrigan says, "Well, what for?" And Zoran says, "Well, I investigate supernatural, paranormal activity. I'm very rich. I have the resources to provide you to better equip your office. But in order to have my financial resources, Corrigan, you've got to partner with me. So here's my card. Think about it. I'll be back the next day." Well, what does Corrigan do? He actually goes out and he recruits a team of investigative assistants, and he even forms the Cryptica Crimes Agency. And it's a really motley crew of assistants who he hires. Just about none of them have any real skill or training in investigative affairs. The first assistant he hires is a little person named Bug McGrew. And McGrew's somewhere in his late 50s, rather cantankerous fellow, but the ladies love him. Bug suffers from necrophilia, so at any moment in time he just collapses. He falls unconscious and he's out for a period of time. We're also introduced to the character of Hassan al-Armani, and Bug is often partnered with Hassan, and he comes to refer to Hassan as Al. And at first Al doesn't like it, but then later on he takes it as an affectionate nickname. Al wears a power suit. He's very well built, handsome, wears shades, appears rather intelligent, but he's a real non-believer at the start. And during his time as one of Corrigan's assistants, he does come to open his eyes to supernatural and paranormal activity. We're also introduced to Signer. I think that's her real name. It's never mentioned if it's a nickname. But Signer is Kim's roommate, and Signer needs a job. So Corrigan says, "All right, you're hired." Gina, the reporter who interviewed Corrigan for the magazine, is also in need of a job. She gets fired by the editor, who feels that her interests lie too closely to Corrigan. So Corrigan, feeling bad, hires her. And she's probably the one who has the most relevant experience for the job. We're also introduced to Betty Bumfist, and she's somewhere in her late 20s, early 30s. She claims to carry the spirit of an ancient feudal warrior. At times, her voice goes very scratchy and growly, and she claims it's the warrior spirit talking through her. And this spirit is very much like the Spectre in that he's bloodthirsty, he lusts for vengeance, but he also makes very cruel comments about Betty's body. She is quite obese, and he makes very hurtful comments about her. And Gina becomes a friend to Betty over the course of their time together. And Gina says to Betty, Betty, do you really have the spirit inside you, or is this just your way of saying hurtful things about you without admitting that it's you saying these things? And there's this real back and forth where, right up until the end, the last issue of this run, we're not really sure if there is a spirit inside there or if this is something that Betty has made up. So Zoran comes back and he sees that Corrigan's put this team together, and Zoran says okay, and Corrigan wants to have this grand unveiling of the team, but the Spectre threatens to make the transformation. And Jim, in time, will tell the team that he knows the Spectre, but he never explains to the team that he is the Spectre. So at their start, Corrigan's able to reason with the Spectre, and the Spectre begrudgingly agrees to let Corrigan have this, to let him have some semblance of a separate mission from the Spectres. But still, it becomes clear that at points Corrigan has to make a quick exit in order to become the Spectre. Zoran appears only 3 times in the run, and I get the feeling that Moench intended for him to return at some point. His mysterious disappearance would be explained, but the series got canceled, and so Moench couldn't do that. There is a tie-in with Invasion, but to his credit, Moench writes a story that stands apart from the Invasion storyline. So even though Corrigan has to separate himself from the group and allow the Spectre to be involved in the main Invasion storyline, there is a neat story where Cryptica investigates the little gray men type aliens, and there's some neat insight on the nature of UFOs and their flying saucers. Now, following this Invasion tie-in, Moench embarks on a 6-part story called Ghosts in the Machine. Of course, the important thing about Invasion was this was the introduction of the concept of the metagene. This was DC's way of talking about mutants without using the word mutants. So instead of having mutants, DC had metahumans, people who experienced some significant trauma or event that triggered their dormant metagene, and it either enhanced already existing powers or it gave them a whole new set of powers, whereas before they were completely quote-unquote normal human beings. And so in this story of Ghosts in the Machine, a secret branch of the U.S. government takes one of the victims of the metagene bomb, takes him to a secure remote facility, triggers his metagene, but quickly realizes this was a huge mistake because the man they captured is a serial killer. In fact, his wife has gone to Corrigan to ask him to search for her husband. She comes and says, my husband is just a simple day worker, but he's disappeared and I can't find him. At the same time, a police officer or detective named Praxis shows up at Quarrel's precinct and says to Quarrel,